The camera lens tracked Anna Volkov like the eye of a predator. Darius Mitchell, balancing a tray of delicate Jew-like appetizers, felt a cold dread snake up his spine. He knew that photographer. He knew the man's real profession had nothing to do with pictures, and it had everything to do with making people disappear. He knew the slight, almost imperceptible way the man's hand rested on his camera bag was not the posture of a photographer, but of a man ready to draw a weapon that wouldn't make a sound. Each clink of a glass was a tick of a clock. Another dollar he didn't have for the mountain of bills on his kitchen table. Another moment his daughter Amara struggled for a full wheeze, but right now, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the man with the camera and the woman in white. Anya Vulov, a vision of power in her immaculate white suit, was oblivious. She was smiling, a practiced, confident expression that graced the covers of business magazines. She was accepting congratulations as the host on stage. A local news anchor with a blindingly white smile began her introduction for the Innovator of the Year award. She's a titan of industry, a true visionary whose work at Vulov BioArm is changing the world. Darius's eyes flickered back to the photographer. The man hadn't moved a muscle. He was a statue of deadly patience, blending in perfectly with the press corps, but Darius saw what no one else did. The man's position was a perfect triangulation with the stage and the main exit. It was a kill box. Darius's years in corporate security a lifetime ago, before his world had shrunk to hospital waiting rooms and late-night shifts, screamed at him. The muscle memory, the threat analysis, it was all coming back in a sickening, adrenaline-fueled rush. And now, please join me in welcoming the woman of the hour, Miss Anna Vulov. Applause thundered through the grand ballroom. Anya started toward the stage, a graceful, confident walk that took her directly into the assassin's meticulously planned line of sight. Darius's mind raced, a chaotic slideshow of possibilities and dead ends. Security was focused on the crowd, looking for obvious threats, not a wolf hidden among the sheep. A shout would be too late. The assassin was a professional. The moment Darius opened his mouth, the man would act, and Anya would be dead before she hit the floor. He had seconds, maybe less. He scanned his surroundings, his training kicking in. What was his weapon? He had no gun, no radio. He was a waiter. He had a tray of hors d'oeuvres. It was useless. He looked at the service station beside him, a silver coffee pot, ornate and steaming, a tray of half-empty glasses, and a large tin of a dark, rich dipping sauce. He had one tool, not a weapon. A diversion, a messy, chaotic, career-ending diversion. He thought of Amara, her small, trusting face, the wheeze in her chest that was the soundtrack to his nightmares. What would happen to her if he was arrested? If he lost this job? The thought was a physical blow, but the alternative, watching a woman be murdered in front of him, was impossible. He took a deep, steadying breath and grabbed the coffee pot. It was scalding hot, the heat searing through the thin napkin wrapped around the handle. With grim purpose, he moved, angling his body to intercept her path to the stage. He had to make it look like an accident, a clumsy, unforgivable accident. Just as she passed, he stumbled. The world seemed to slow down. His leg buckled convincingly. The tray of appetizers went flying, a colorful spray of food scattering across the polished marble floor. The coffee pot tilted and a wave of black burning liquid erupted over the pristine white fabric of her suit. It was a shotgun blast of black ink, a violent, ugly stain that spread instantly. In that moment, Darius, a black single dad working 2 shifts, knew the weight of this public transgression would be doubly severe. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Anya cried out, a sharp sound of shock and pain stumbling back from the searing heat. Her face was a mask of furious disbelief, her eyes locking onto his. The applause died instantly, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. Her security team, 2 large men in dark suits who had been scanning the crowd, swarmed Darius, their movements swift and brutal. One slammed him against a column while the other shielded Anna, pushing her back. "Get your hands off me." Anya's voice was ice, sharp and cutting, though it trembled with shock. Darius didn't resist as his arm was twisted behind his back. The pain was a distant, unimportant signal. His eyes were fixed across the room. He saw it. The photographer, the assassin, had lowered his camera. The man's face was a stone mask of thwarted rage. The window of opportunity, the clean shot, was gone. The chaos had worked. The assassin calmly turned and began to melt back into the crowd. Just another photographer leaving a ruined event. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" one of the guards snarled in his ear, hauling him to his feet. Darius looked at Anna. She was standing there surrounded by her staff, her billion-dollar night in ruins, her suit destroyed, her skin likely burned. Humiliation and anger radiated from her. Amid her fury, he hoped she saw the truth in his eyes. The frantic, desperate warning he couldn't speak. This wasn't an attack. It was a rescue. The world blurred into a chaotic symphony of shouting and scraping sounds as Darius was hauled across the marble floor. The guard's grip was brutal, twisting the fabric of his cheap uniform jacket at the shoulder. "Move it," the man growled, shoving him toward a service corridor. "My wallet! My keys are in my locker," Darius managed, his voice rough. It was a lie, a desperate bid for a few more seconds. He needed to plant the seed. He needed one person to hear him, one professional who might look past the stained apron and the terrified, low-wage worker. As Darius, a black man who had just been released, stepped onto the curb, he saw him. A tall man with graying temples and the calm, watchful eyes of a man who saw everything. Gareth, Anna Volkov's head of security. Darius had seen him during the pre-event sweep, noted his professionalism, the way he moved like a shadow, always a step ahead. He was their last chance. Darius twisted his head, ignoring the flare of pain in his arm. He met Gareth's eyes. The security chief was watching him with a cold and analytical stare, already processing the incident report in his head. Darius opened his mouth, but the guard holding him slammed him against the wall. "Shut up!" There was no time to speak. Darius forced his lips to form the word, exaggerating the movement, pouring every ounce of urgency he had into the silent message. "Photographer." Gareth's expression didn't change, but Darius saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not understanding, but a momentary break in his composure. A question. It was enough. The guard shoved him forward again, and the ballroom, Anya, and his last hope vanished as they plunged into the stark, fluorescent-lit hallway that led to the back offices. Meanwhile, Anna was whisked into a private lounge, the door clicking shut behind her, sealing off the cacophony of the ruined event. Her personal assistant, a young woman named Lena, was fluttering around her, dabbing at the horrific stain with a cloth napkin. "Miss Vulov, we should get you to a doctor. That coffee was boiling." "I'm fine," Anya snapped, her voice tight with controlled fury. The burn on her shoulder and chest was beginning to blossom into a deep, throbbing pain, a fire spreading beneath her skin. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the white-hot humiliation. She had been assaulted, made a spectacle of in front of her peers, her investors, the press. The stain on her suit felt like a stain on her reputation. "It was deliberate," she said, more to herself than to Lena. He looked right at me. It wasn't a stumble. The door opened and Donovan Croft, her second in command, swept in. His face was a perfect mask of concern, but his eyes, small and dark, held a glint of something else. Excitement. "Anya, my God, are you all right? I've already spoken to hotel security. They have him in custody. We will press this to the fullest extent. Assault and battery will ruin him." His voice was smooth, reassuring, but his eagerness felt predatory. "Find out who he is," Anna commanded, shrugging off Lena's attempts to help her out of the ruined jacket. "I want his name. I want to know everything about him. I want to know why a waiter would throw away his life to ruin my night." "Of course," Donovan said, already pulling out his phone. "He's probably some disgruntled lunatic, a nobody. We'll make sure he pays." Just then, Gareth, her head of security, entered the room. He closed the door quietly, his presence immediately calming the frantic energy. "Miss Vulov, the man is being held in a security office downstairs. The police are on their way." "Did he say anything?" Anya asked, her voice sharp. "Did he give a reason?" Gareth paused, his gaze steady. "No, ma'am." He's refused to say a word. "But as we were escorting him out, He did something unusual. Donovan scoffed. Everything he did was unusual, Gareth. He's clearly unstable. Gareth ignored him, his attention fixed on Anya. He looked directly at me. He mouthed a word. Anna waited. Her breath held. The throbbing in her shoulder seemed to fade as a new, sharp feeling took its place. Curiosity, he said. Photographer. The word hung in the air, nonsensical and strange. Lena and Donovan looked at each other in confusion. Photographer? Donovan repeated with a dismissive laugh. What? He thought someone was taking his picture. The man is insane. Anya said nothing. She replayed the moment in her mind. The waiter's lunge, the heat, the shock, and his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a madman. They were the eyes of a man who was terrified. Not for himself, but for her. It was a look of such intense, desperate warning that it had cut through her own shock. Photographer, Miss Vulov, Gareth prompted gently. Your orders? Charge him, Donovan insisted, stepping forward. Let the police handle this lunatic. We need to focus on damage control with our guests. Anna waved a hand, dismissing them both. Leave me, both of you. Gareth, stay outside the door. Donovan looked like he wanted to argue, but a single glare from Anya sent him retreating from the room with Lena. The door clicked shut, leaving Anna alone in the silent, luxurious room. She peeled off the stained jacket, wincing as the fabric pulled at her reddened skin. She stared at her reflection in the gilded mirror. The powerful CEO, the innovator of the year, now looking disheveled, vulnerable, and marked. The whole thing was a puzzle that didn't fit. A clumsy waiter doesn't risk a felony charge over spilled coffee, and he certainly doesn't send a cryptic one-word message to her head of security. The word echoed in her mind, refusing to be dismissed. Photographer. She looked at the ruined suit, a symbol of her perfect, controlled world, now irrevocably stained. The waiter had stained it. But as she stood there, a cold, unsettling thought began to form in her mind. What if the stain wasn't the attack? What if the stain was the warning? Downstairs, in a windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, Darius sat on a hard plastic chair. His hands were cuffed behind his back. 2 hotel security guards stood by the door trying to look imposing, while a pair of uniformed police officers conducted a preliminary questioning. Let's try this again. The older cop, a man named Miller with a weary face, said, What's your name? Darius remained silent. His jaw was tight, his gaze fixed on a crack in the linoleum floor. He knew the protocol. Say nothing. The moment he started talking, he was just a crazy waiter with a conspiracy theory. He had no proof, nothing but a gut feeling born from a past life he'd buried. If he mentioned a professional hitman, they'd think he was delusional. His only play was silence. He had thrown his message in a bottle into the sea, and his only hope was that Gareth was a good enough sailor to find it. Look, pal, Miller's partner said, leaning forward, you're in a world of trouble. You assaulted Anna Volkov. You think she doesn't have lawyers that can make you wish you were never born? You help yourself by helping us. Why did you do it? Darius thought of Amara sleeping in her hospital-style bed at home, the soft hum of the oxygen machine her constant companion. Fear, bolst and sharp, twisted in his gut. What had he done? He just orphaned his daughter for a woman he didn't even know. His gamble felt impossibly foolish now, sitting in the sterile silence of the security office. He closed his eyes, picturing Amara's face, and held on to his silence like a shield. Upstairs, Anna had put on a spare blouse Lena had retrieved from her emergency kit. It was plain, functionless, and a world away from the bespoke suit she had been wearing. She paced the length of the lounge, the adrenaline from the incident giving way to a restless and analytical energy. She opened the door. Gareth stood just outside, his posture alert. Get me everything you can on that waiter. Name, address, work history, everything. And I want the complete guest and press list from tonight's event. Now, Miss Vulov, Donovan's voice cut in. He was striding down the hall, his phone pressed to his ear. I've just spoken with our legal team. They're ready to file the initial complaint. The hotel manager is also prepared to make a statement about their rigorous employee screening to mitigate our own liability. He lowered his phone. "This is a PR crisis, Anya. We need to control the narrative. Focusing on some waiter's cryptic nonsense is a waste of precious time." "It's my time to waste," Anya said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Gareth has his orders." Donovan's face tightened for a fraction of a second before smoothing back into a mask of concerned professionalism. "Of course, it's just I'm worried about you. You've had a traumatic experience. Perhaps you should let us handle the details." "I am handling them," Anna stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned to Gareth. "And get me all the security footage from the ballroom for the last hour, every camera angle. I want to see exactly what happened." Gareth simply nodded. "Right away, ma'am." He moved off with silent efficiency, leaving Anna and Donovan in the hallway. "Anya, this is a mistake," Donovan said, his voice a low, urgent murmur. "Let the police do their job. You're letting this man get in your head." "Someone got in my head tonight, Donovan," she replied, her gaze unreadable. "I'm just trying to figure out who." An hour later, Gareth was back. He carried a tablet, his expression grim. Anna was sitting in the lounge, Donovan hovering nearby, ostensibly coordinating with their PR team, but clearly monitoring the situation. The waiter's name is Darius Mitchell. Gareth began, his voice low and professional. 40 years old, a Black American single father. His daughter has a rare pulmonary condition. He's been working 2, sometimes 3 jobs for the past 5 years to cover medical expenses. Before that, Gareth paused, swiping on the tablet. Before that, he was a senior security specialist for a private firm, top level, handled executive protection for CEOs in high-risk territories. He left the field abruptly 6 years ago after an incident. Anya stared at him, a security specialist, not a disgruntled lunatic, a trained professional. The pieces began to shift, forming a new alarming picture. Donovan shifted his weight, his expression unreadable. "That doesn't mean anything," Donovan said quickly. He could have snapped, the stress of his daughter's illness. "I've also reviewed the press credentials," Gareth continued, ignoring Donovan. "All the major outlets are accounted for, but there was one freelance photographer whose credentials seemed thin. His name is registered as Peter Marks, but the agency he listed doesn't exist. He left the premises less than 2 minutes after the incident with Mr. Mitchell." A cold knot formed in Anna's stomach. "The footage," she said, her voice a whisper. Gareth tapped the screen. He brought up a multi-angle view of the ballroom. "Watch the man in the gray suit by the west pillar. That's Peter Marks." The video played in silence. They saw Darius moving through the tables, his expression tense. They saw Anya smiling, beginning her walk to the stage, and they saw the photographer raising his camera, but he wasn't aiming at the stage. He was aiming directly at Anna's path. His stance was perfectly balanced, his movements minimal and precise. It was the stance of a marksman. Then they saw Darius lunge. The coffee, the chaos. The camera view switched to a close-up of the photographer as the crowd reacted in shock. His face registered not surprise, but pure cold fury. His jaw clenched. His mission was compromised. He lowered his camera, turned, and disappeared into the panicked crowd. The footage ended. The room was deathly silent. Donovan was pale, his confident demeanor gone. "It could be a coincidence," he started, but his voice lacked conviction. Anna felt the air leave her lungs. The burn on her shoulder was a dull throb, a phantom reminder of the searing heat. But now she understood. That heat had saved her from something infinitely colder. Darius Mitchell hadn't been trying to hurt her. He hadn't been trying to humiliate her. He had been taking the bullet for her. "My God," she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth as the full terrifying weight of the truth crashed down on her. "He saved my life." The silence in the lounge was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Anna sank into a plush armchair, the tablet slipping from her numb fingers and clattering onto the glass table. The video replayed in her mind, a horrifying loop. The assassin's cold eyes, Darius's desperate lunge, the splash of coffee that had been a shield. Donovan Croft was the first to speak, his voice strained. "This changes things, obviously, but we must be careful. This Mitchell could be involved in a more complex way. Perhaps he was meant to create the diversion for a different reason. We can't trust him. He was scrambling, trying to regain control of a narrative that had spun violently out of his grasp. Anna lifted her head, and the look in her eyes silenced him instantly. The shock had burned away, leaving behind a glacial fury. "He's a single father working 3 jobs to keep a sick daughter alive," she said, her voice dangerously low. "He sacrificed the only thing he has left, his freedom, to save my life from a man you dismissed as a lunatic." She stood up, her movements sharp and decisive. "Gareth, ma'am, call the police precinct where they're holding Darius Mitchell. Inform them that my legal counsel is on the way. All charges are to be dropped immediately. I am making no statement against him. In fact, I'm making a statement in his favor. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Miss Vulov, and get a team to his apartment. Now, his daughter Amara, I want her and him under our protection. The man who hired that photographer knows the plan failed, and he knows why it failed. Mitchell and his child are in incredible danger." "My thoughts exactly," Gareth said, already dialing a number on his phone. "I'll dispatch a prime security detail." "Anya, this is an overreaction," Donovan protested, his voice rising. "Bringing them into our security bubble creates an unacceptable liability." "We don't know what I know, Donovan," Anya cut him off, turning to face him fully, "is that I was the target of a professional assassination attempt. That man," she pointed a trembling finger toward the hallway where Darius had been dragged away, "is the only reason I'm still breathing, and you are standing here arguing about liability. From this moment on, you will do exactly as I say, or you will be explaining your obstruction to the board of directors. Am I understood?" Donovan's face paled. He gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod. "Understood." Anna turned back to Gareth. "I'm going down to that precinct. I want to talk to him myself." "Anya, no," Donovan exclaimed. "It's not secure." "Then make it secure," she snapped at Gareth, grabbing her coat. "I'm not sitting here waiting while the man who saved me is sitting in a cage." Darius heard the heavy footsteps approaching the interrogation room and braced himself. It was probably Miller and his partner again, ready for another round of pointless questions. The door swung open, but it wasn't the police. A lawyer in a suit that cost more than Darius's car stepped in, followed by Gareth. Darius's eyes met the security chief's. Gareth gave a single slow nod, a silent acknowledgement that the message had been received. Relief washed over Darius so powerfully his knees felt weak. "Mr. Mitchell," the lawyer said, his voice smooth as silk, "my name is Alistair Finch. I represent Miss Anna Vulov, at Miss. Vulov's personal and vehement request. All charges against you are being dropped. You are free to go." The 2 police officers standing in the corner exchanged baffled looks. Miller stepped forward. "Now, hold on a minute. We have a signed complaint from hotel management, property damage, creating a public panic." Finch simply raised an eyebrow. "And do you have a statement from the victim? Because Miss Vulov is prepared to give a sworn testimony that Mr. Mitchell's actions, while unorthodox, prevented a far greater tragedy. She considers him a hero." Now, if you'll excuse us, the finality in the lawyer's tone was absolute. Miller threw his hands up in defeat and walked out of the room. A junior officer came in with a key and unlocked Darius's handcuffs. The metal clicked open and he rubbed his raw wrists, the feeling slowly returning to his fingers. He stood up, his body aching from being slammed against the wall. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice rough. "Miss Vulov would like to speak with you," Gareth said. "She's waiting in a car outside." The walk out of the precinct was a blur. The sterile hallways gave way to the cold night air. As Darius, a black man who had just been released, stepped onto the curb, a sleek black town car was idling, its tinted windows hiding the occupant. Gareth opened the rear door. Anna Volkov sat inside, her face pale in the dim light of the dashboard. The anger was gone, replaced by an expression he couldn't quite read, a mixture of gratitude, shock, and an intensity that was almost unnerving. He slid into the plush leather seat, the door closing with a soft, solid thud, sealing them in a cocoon of silence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Your shoulder," Darius said finally, nodding toward her. "You should have a doctor look at that burn." Anya waved a dismissive hand. "It's fine. It will heal." She turned to face him, her blue eyes searching his. "They told me who you are or who you were." "A security specialist a long time ago," Darius said. "You recognized him. It wasn't a question. I've seen him before in another life." "His name isn't Peter Marks. He's a ghost, a freelancer who takes contracts others won't touch. He's one of the best, and he was there for me," Anya stated, the reality still sinking in. "Yes, who hired him?" she asked, the question sharp, direct. Darius shook his head. "I don't know. That's not how men like him work. He would never reveal his client. All I know is that the threat was real, and it's not over." Anna's gaze didn't waver. "No," she said softly, "it's not. He knows you stopped him, which means he knows who you are." Her expression hardened with a new resolve. "And that is something I will not allow. You saved my life, Mr. Mitchell. Now it seems it's my turn to save yours." The words hung in the airtight silence of the luxury car. "My turn to save yours." For a moment, Darius felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. He had spent the last 6 years meticulously building a small, anonymous life. He was a waiter, a handyman, a ghost. Now, in the space of a single chaotic hour, he had been seen, and the person who saw him was the most powerful woman in the city. Panic, sharp and acrid, cut through his exhaustion. "My daughter," he said, his voice a low, urgent rasp. "Amara, she's at home. The sitter left an hour ago. I have to get to her." He reached for the door handle, a primal instinct to run to his child, overriding everything else. Anna didn't move. She simply said, "She's not at home, Mr. Mitchell." Darius froze, his hand hovering over the handle. He turned to her, his eyes narrowed with a sudden fierce suspicion. "What does that mean?" "Where is she?" "She is safe," Anna said calmly, though she could see the storm gathering in his expression. "Gareth's team picked her up 30 minutes ago. There is a pediatric nurse with her. They are waiting for us at a secure location." Darius stared at her, his mind struggling to process the information. A security team, a pediatric nurse, a secure location. These were elements from his old life, a language of wealth and threat he had tried to forget. "You sent a team of strangers to my daughter?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I sent a team of professionals to protect the daughter of the man who just saved my life," Anya corrected, her tone unyielding. "I took a calculated risk that you would prefer her safe with my people than alone and vulnerable in an apartment the whole world now knows is yours." The logic was cold, hard, and undeniable. He hated it. He hated the loss of control, the feeling of being a chess piece moved by a more powerful player. But she was right. If the assassin knew his name, finding his address would take minutes. The anger in his chest warred with a profound, soul-deep relief. Amara was safe. He sank back against the leather seat, the fight draining out of him. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere you can't be found," she replied, as the car sped silently through the glittering city streets, leaving his old life further and further behind. The secure location was the penthouse suite of a residential skyscraper that Vulov Bioarm kept for its top executives. It was a palace in the sky with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking panorama of the city lights. When they walked in, the first thing Darius saw was Amara. She was sitting on a cream-colored sofa that was bigger than their entire living room, her small legs dangling over the edge. She was watching a cartoon on a television the size of a wall, a half-eaten bowl of ice cream in her lap. A kind-faced woman in blue scrubs sat nearby, watching her with a gentle smile. "Daddy." Amara's face lit up. She slid off the sofa and ran to him, her small body colliding with his legs. Darius, a tall man with deep brown skin, swept her up in his arms, burying his face in her tightly coiled hair, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. He held her tight, the solid, warm weight of her, a grounding force in a world that had tilted on its axis. "Hey, Pumpkin, I'm sorry I'm late." "It's okay," she mumbled into his shoulder. "The nice lady said we were having an adventure." She looked over his shoulder and saw Anna standing in the doorway, a figure of quiet authority. "Is she the queen of the castle?" Amara whispered. Darius, his deep brown hands still resting on his daughter, managed a weak smile. "Something like that." He set her down, his hand never leaving her shoulder. He looked at the nurse. Thank you. She's a delight, the woman replied warmly. Her vitals are stable. I'll be just outside if you need anything. She quietly let herself out, leaving Darius, Amara, and Anna alone in the cavernous living room. Anya watched the interaction, a flicker of an unreadable emotion in her eyes. She saw the fierce, unconditional love of a father, and it made the cold corporate calculus of her world seem shallow and insignificant. This was what was at stake, this small, fragile family. Mr. Mitchell, Darius, she began, her tone softer now. We need to talk. He nodded, guiding Amara back to the sofa. Go ahead and finish your cartoon, sweetie. Daddy needs to talk to the two Miss Vulov for a minute. He walked over to the window, standing beside Anya, though he kept a respectful distance. They both looked out at the city below, a river of light and movement. You're not safe, Anya said, getting straight to the point. Neither of you. Not until we find out who hired that man. I know, Darius said grimly. Men like him don't give up. They just change their methods. My resources are now your resources, Anna stated. Security, financial support, the best medical care for your daughter. Anything you need, you will have it. You have my word. Darius turned to look at her. I don't want a handout, Miss Vulov. This isn't a handout, she countered, meeting his gaze. It's a debt, one I fully intend to repay, but I'm also offering you a job. He raised an eyebrow. I'm a waiter. No, she said, shaking her head. You're not. You're the man who saw a threat no one else did. You're a security specialist with experience in a world I'm just now realizing I know nothing about. I need you. I need your expertise to help Gareth and my team find the person who tried to kill me. The police will move slowly. They'll be bound by red tape. The threat is inside my world, maybe even inside my company. I need someone on my side who knows how to navigate the shadows. The offer hung in the air between them. It was a lifeline. It was a cage. It was a way back into a world he had fought to escape, a world of violence and paranoia. But it was also the only way to protect Amara. The choice wasn't a choice at all. He thought of the endless medical bills, the constant grinding worry that kept him awake at night. He looked at Amara, so small and innocent against the backdrop of immense luxury, completely unaware of the danger swirling around them. Then he looked back at Anna, at the determined set of her jaw. She wasn't just a CEO, she was a target, and that made him a target too. He took a deep breath. The smell of coffee and fear was finally fading, replaced by the clean, sterile air of wealth and power. All right, Miss Vulov, Darius said, his voice steady and clear. The ghost of the man he used to be stepping forward. Tell me everything. Who are your enemies? Anya didn't hesitate. She led him to a large glass dining table, pulling out a tablet and setting it between them. The city lights twinkled below, a silent, indifferent audience to the unfolding drama. My enemies are the same as any CEOs, she began, her voice crisp and businesslike. A familiar shield she was using to process the unfamiliar terror. Corporate rivals in the pharmaceutical space, activist groups who think we're corporate demons, disgruntled former employees. The list is a mile long and mostly noise. I'm not interested in the noise, Darius said, his focus absolute. I'm interested in the signal. Who knew the specifics of tonight's event? The timing, the security layout, the fact that you would be on that stage at that exact moment. Anya's fingers flew across the tablet screen, pulling up an internal document. The event was public, but the detailed minute-by-minute schedule was only circulated to my senior executive team and the event organizers. Give me the executive list. She turned the tablet to face him. A corporate hierarchy chart glowed on the screen, a web of names and titles. At the top was her own name. Directly below it was Donovan Croft. The person who benefits most directly from my death, Anya said, her voice flat. Is Donovan as COO, he would automatically become interim CEO. The board likes him. He's smooth. He's predictable. He would have a strong chance of making the position permanent. Tell me about him, Darius said, leaning forward. His waiter persona completely gone, replaced by the sharp, analytical focus of an investigator. What was his reaction tonight? Concerned, Anya recalled, a frown creasing her brow. He was insistent that we press charges, that we ruin you. He called you a lunatic, she paused. He also tried to stop me from investigating your message. He said it was a waste of time, that I should let the police handle it. He tried to control the flow of information, Darius stated. He wanted you to follow the simple, obvious path. He wanted me to be the villain of the story because it was a convenient distraction. It makes sense, Anna admitted, the words tasting like poison. But Donovan has been with the company for 10 years. He was my father's protege before he was mine. It's hard to believe. Belief has nothing to do with it. Darius cut her off, his tone not unkind but firm. It's about motive and opportunity. He had both. We need to look at what's underneath the mask. Financials, communications. Who has he been meeting with outside of the office? Has his behavior changed recently? The questions were rapid fire, precise, and practical. They were the questions of a professional, and Anna found herself answering them, the process of laying out the facts helping to organize the chaos in her mind. Just as she was about to pull up another file, the suite door opened and Gareth entered. He nodded to Anna, his eyes assessing Darius with a new level of respect. Miss Vulov, the detail is in place. The building is secure. We have a team monitoring Mr. Mitchell's apartment. He turned to Darius. I owe you an apology and my thanks. You heard the message, Darius replied, accepting the unspoken truce. That's what matters. What have you found? We've started a quiet preliminary background check on the entire executive team with a priority on Mr. Croft, Gareth said, his voice low. Nothing overt on the surface, no major debts, no obvious vices. But there is one thing. He's been systematically selling off small blocks of his personal company's stock for the past 6 months. Never enough to trigger an automatic flag, but it's a steady pattern. He's liquidated nearly $2 million. Darius and Anna exchanged a look. The air in the room grew colder. Why? Anya whispered. Our stock is about to soar after the merger. It makes no financial sense for him to sell now. Unless he needed cash for an off-the-books expense, Darius said grimly. A down payment, for instance. A man like the one at the event tonight doesn't come cheap. He stood up and began to pace, his mind working, connecting the dots. Or unless he knew something was coming that would tank the stock price. Something like the CEO being assassinated and the company being thrown into chaos. The logic was brutal and inescapable. The man Anna had trusted, the man who stood beside her in boardrooms and at press conferences, might have been plotting her murder for months. We can't move against him on this alone, Gareth warned. It's circumstantial. He'll say he was diversifying his portfolio. I know, Darius said, stopping his pacing. He looked from Gareth to Anya. So we don't move against him. We let him think he's safe. We let him think I'm just a waiter who got lucky, a problem that has been neutralized. Anya looked at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. You want him to get comfortable? I want him to get sloppy, Darius corrected. He failed tonight. His problem hasn't gone away. The audit is still happening. You're still alive. He's going to have to try again, and this time we'll be waiting for him. He glanced over at the sofa where Amara had drifted off to sleep, her small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The sight seemed to steel his resolve. This wasn't just about protecting Anya anymore. It was about ending the threat so he and his daughter could have a life again. Gareth, Darius said, his voice now holding a quiet command that felt entirely natural. Tomorrow morning, I need access to all of Croft's communications, emails, phone logs, calendar appointments, everything you can get without tipping him off. He then turned to Anya. And you tomorrow, you go to work. You act as if nothing has changed. You hold your meetings, you smile, and you keep Donovan Croft closer than you ever have before. The next morning, the city looked different from the penthouse. The rising sun painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, but the beauty felt distant, clinical, like a painting viewed through bulletproof glass. Anna stood before a full-length mirror, knotting the belt on a charcoal gray power suit. The pristine white suit was a ghost, a memory of a version of herself that had existed only 24 hours ago. Confident, untouchable, naive. Today she was a target, and she had to dress for the part. Her shoulder ached with a dull, persistent throb from the burn. a physical reminder of her new reality. Every instinct screamed at her to stay in this fortress in the sky, to lock the doors and let Gareth handle it. But Darius's words echoed in her mind. Keep him closer than you ever have before. It was the hardest thing she could do, and the only thing that mattered. When she walked into the living room, Darius was already there, standing by the windows with a tablet in his hand. He wore simple dark pants and a gray Henley shirt provided by her staff. He no longer looked like a waiter. His natural, tight coils were neatly trimmed, and his warm brown skin seemed to absorb the room's calm light. He looked like the man Gareth's file had described, focused, dangerous, and completely at home in a crisis. Amara was at the table with the nurse, happily drawing on a piece of paper, a universe away from the silent war her father was now waging. "Morning," Darius said without looking up from the screen. "Gareth set me up with a feed to the building's internal servers. I am starting with Croft's email." "Find anything?" Anya asked, pouring herself a black coffee, her hand surprisingly steady. Just the usual corporate doublespeak so far. But people like Croft, they're arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone else. They always leave a trail. He finally looked at her, his eyes doing a quick professional sweep. "Are you ready for this?" Anya took a sip of the hot coffee. "No, but I'll do it." "He's going to test you," Darius warned. "He'll be watching for any sign that you suspect him. Your story for dropping the charges has to be cold and strategic, something he'll understand. My lawyers advised me that a protracted legal battle with a sympathetic figure like a struggling single father would be a PR disaster, especially during a merger." Anya recited the words feeling foreign and rehearsed. It was a business decision. Darius nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Good. That's exactly what he'll believe." The ride down the elevator was a descent back into the world where she was prey. As she stepped into the lobby of Vulov Bioarm, the atmosphere was electric with gossip. Heads turned, people whispered behind their hands. She ignored them all, her face an unreadable mask, and walked straight to the executive floor. Donovan was waiting outside her office, his face a perfect picture of solicitor's concern. "Anna, thank God I was so worried. Are you sure you should be here today?" "I'm fine, Donovan," she said, her voice cool and level. She walked past him into her office, a cavern of glass and steel overlooking the city, "and I have a company to run." Of course, he said, following her in and closing the door. "It's just the news about you dropping the charges against that waiter. I have to say, I think it's a mistake. It makes us look weak." Anna sat behind her desk, deliberately taking a moment to arrange a file before looking at him. "It was a strategic decision, Donovan. Our legal team ran the optics. A billionaire CEO persecuting a down-on-his-luck single dad. The media would have crucified us. The merger is too delicate for that kind of bad press. We cut our losses. The man is fired, blacklisted from every high-end establishment in the city. He's been dealt with. End of story." She watched him closely. He processed her words, his expression shifting from concern to understanding and then to a visible relaxation. She had given him the answer he wanted, the one that fit his worldview. Anna Vulov hadn't gone soft. She'd just made a ruthless business calculation. He was safe. "I see," he said, a small, satisfied smile touching his lips. "Cold but smart. I should have known." He leaned against her desk. "Well, I'm glad we can put this ugly business behind us. Now, about the final presentation for the merger committee." As he spoke, Anna felt a chill creep up her spine. He was so close, so comfortable, a predator who believed he had outsmarted his prey. She forced herself to listen, to nod, to engage every moment, a supreme act of will. Miles away in a secure communications room in the basement of the residential tower, Darius stared at a wall of monitors. He was a machine sifting through mountains of data, emails, calendars, expense reports. He found the stock sales Gareth had mentioned, a slow, methodical bleed of assets. Then he found something else. In Donovan's calendar, hidden among meetings about synergy and capitalization, was a recurring weekly appointment. It was labeled simply HM and had no location data. It was always on a Tuesday, always for 30 minutes, and it was always followed within the hour by a call placed from Donovan's office phone to an encrypted, untraceable number. It was a thread, thin, but it was there. He started a deep search on the initials. HM. He cross-referenced them with employee lists, vendors, board members. Nothing. It was a dead end. He leaned back, frustrated, and his eyes fell on another screen showing Donovan's expense reports. He scrolled through them idly. Dinners, flights, hotels, all of it standard, except for one recurring charge, a weekly payment to a high-end floral delivery service routed through a miscellaneous account. It was the same day as the mysterious HM appointment. Darius pulled up the floral service, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He hacked into their delivery records, his old skills coming back to him with frightening ease. He found the weekly order from Donovan Croft. It was always the same, a bouquet of white lilies. And he found the delivery address. It wasn't an office, it wasn't a home. It was a private room at the Helio Medical Center, a long-term care facility for the chronically ill. The room was registered to one patient, Helen Monroe. Darius ran the name. His blood ran cold. Helen Monroe was the widow of Alistair Monroe, Anna's father's business partner, the co-founder of the company, who had died of a sudden, unexpected heart attack 2 years ago. The same cause of death, the assassin had been hired to simulate for Anna. The information on the screen was a ghost, a specter from the company's past rising up to haunt the present. Alistair Monroe, co-founder, dead at 62. Darius felt a jolt, a live wire connection that arced across 2 years of history and lit up the dark corners of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about a corporate takeover anymore. This was older, deeper. He immediately sent a secure, encrypted message from the tablet to Anya's phone. It was only 6 words. Alistair Monroe, check his official cause of death. In her glass-walled office, Anna was concluding a meeting with the heads of the R&D department. She was projecting an aura of absolute control, discussing clinical trial data with cool precision. But her mind was a whirlwind. Every time Donovan Croft had smiled at her that day, every word of faint concern now felt like a razor blade against her skin. Her phone buzzed discreetly on the desk. She glanced at it. The message was from the secure app Darius had installed. She saw the name, Alistair Monroe, and her breath caught in her throat. Alistair was a warm memory, a man with a booming laugh who had been like an uncle to her. His death had been a shock, a tragedy that had shaken the company to its core. She ended the meeting abruptly. A sudden migraine, her convenient excuse. The moment the door clicked shut, she was at her terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard, bypassing the public archives and entering her father's private digital files. She found the folder, Monroe, Condolences. She clicked open the file containing the death certificate. The formal, bureaucratic text was cold and final. Cause of death, sudden cardiac arrest. Anna leaned back in her chair, a wave of nausea washing over her. The assassin's weapon, the ice projectile, was designed to perfectly mimic a heart attack. It wasn't a new plan. It was a repeat performance. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Alistair hadn't just died. He had been executed, and Donovan had been playing the long game all along, clearing the board of its 2 founding pieces, one king at a time. She stood up, her movement stiff, and walked to the window. The city sprawled below her, a testament to the empire her father and Alistair had built. An empire Donovan was trying to steal over their dead bodies. The anger that rose in her was so pure and so cold it felt like it could freeze the sun. She packed her briefcase, her hands moving with a new, grim purpose. She told her assistant she was leaving for the day, ignoring the woman's concerned expression. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur of traffic and lights. All she could see was Alistair's smiling face. When she swept into the suite, Darius and Gareth were waiting. A tactical map of the situation spread out on the large screen of the television. "It was him," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. 2 years ago, he killed Alistair. "We can't prove that," Gareth said cautiously. "The man was cremated. There's no body to exhume. His doctor signed the death certificate. There was no foul play suspected. A doctor can be fooled by a sophisticated weapon, or a doctor can be paid," Darius countered, his eyes fixed on Anya. "What we have is a pattern and a link. Helen Monroe." Anya's brow furrowed. Helen, Alistair's wife. She was devastated after he died. She withdrew from public life completely. "I haven't seen her in over a year." She's in a long-term care facility. Donovan Croft visits her, Darius said, bringing her image up on the screen. A frail-looking woman with sad eyes. Every Tuesday, he sends her white lilies. Why would the man who murdered her husband visit her every week like a devoted friend? The question hung in the air, sinister and complex. Leverage, Gareth suggested. Maybe she knows something and he's keeping her quiet. Or she's a part of it, Anna said, the thought sickening her. But that doesn't feel right. Helen adored Alistair. There's a third option, Darius said, his voice low. She's his motive. He started pacing, connecting the pieces out loud. Let's say Donovan and Helen were having an affair. She's married to a wealthy, powerful man. The only way for them to be together and have the money is for Alistair to be out of the picture. So Donovan removes him. It's a classic story, Gareth conceded. But it doesn't explain why he'd try to kill me, Anya pointed out. If he has Helen and Alistair's shares, he doesn't need to be CEO. Maybe he doesn't have the shares, Darius mused. Maybe Alistair had a will that left everything to a foundation or to you. Maybe killing Alistair didn't get him the payday he expected. Killing you, however, and taking over the company. That's the ultimate prize. They were swimming in a sea of theories, each one darker than the last. They had no hard evidence, only a chain of terrifying coincidences. We need to get to Helen, Anna said decisively. I need to talk to her. Absolutely not, Gareth said immediately. If Donovan is monitoring her, your presence there would be a massive red flag. He'd know we're onto him. He's right, Darius agreed. We can't go through the front door. We need to find out what's really happening in that room. We need to see what those Tuesday meetings are all about. He stopped pacing and looked at them, a plan forming in his eyes, a plan from his old world of surveillance and infiltration. That facility has security, but it's for keeping dementia patients from wandering out, not for stopping a professional from getting in. I can get inside, Darius said. I can place a listening device in her room. We need to hear what they talk about when they think no one is listening. It was a reckless, dangerous plan, but it was the only one they had. Anna looked at Darius at the quiet confidence in his eyes. He wasn't asking for permission. He was telling her the next move. She thought of the crayon drawing Amara had made, a simple picture of a happy family. This man was risking everything for them. Do it, she said, her voice clear and steady. Do whatever it takes. The sterile blue and white layout of the Helio Medical Center spread across the large screen, looking less like a place of healing and more like a fortress. Darius stood before it, his arms crossed, dissecting the building's vulnerabilities with a cold, practiced eye. The main entrance has a 24/7 security desk, Gareth said, pointing with a laser pen. Keycard access is required for all wings after 9 p.m. Helen Monroe's room is here, 3rd floor, west wing. It's a low traffic area at night. Security cameras are here, here, and here, Darius said, his finger tracing a path on the screen. Lobby, main elevator bank, and the nurse's station on her floor. There's a blind spot in the rear service corridor. I can get in through the loading bay. The night shift is lazy about checking manifests. I'll go in as a third-party contractor for the HVAC system. It gives me a reason to have a tool bag and be on any floor I want. Anya watched him, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. He spoke with such calm authority, as if discussing a routine repair job and not a high-stakes infiltration into a web of murder and conspiracy. Is it safe? She asked, the question sounding weak even to her own ears. Darius finally looked away from the blueprints, his gaze meeting hers. No, he said simply, but it's necessary. Before he left, as he was changing into a nondescript work uniform, Amara ran up to him. She held out a crayon drawing. It was a picture of a stick figure man with tight coils holding hands with a little girl. Above them, a big smiling sun shone in the corner. For good luck, Daddy, she said, her voice small and serious. Darius knelt down, his large, capable hands gently taking the flimsy piece of paper. He looked at the drawing at the simple, perfect world his daughter had created, and the weight of what he was doing settled on him. He was walking into the dark so she could stay in the light. He carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into his breast pocket, a fragile piece of armor over his heart. Thank you, Pumpkin. I'll keep it safe." Anya stood in the doorway, a silent witness to the scene. She watched the way his warm brown face softened, and the fierce tenderness in his expression struck a chord deep inside her, a feeling she couldn't name. When he stood up, his eyes met hers over Amara's head. "Be careful, Darius," she said. The words more than just a polite sentiment. They were a plea. He gave a single firm nod, and then he was gone. The night was cold and moonless. The loading bay of the medical center was a cavern of concrete and shadows smelling of disinfectant and diesel fumes. Darius, dressed in a gray jumpsuit with a fake company logo, walked with a confident stride, a heavy tool bag slung over his shoulder. As predicted, the night watchman barely glanced up from his tabloid, just waving him through after a cursory look at a forged work order. Inside, the air was still and sterile. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting long, distorted shadows down the empty corridors. Every footstep echoed, unnaturally loud in the profound quiet. He took the service elevator, a rattling metal cage, up to the 3rd floor. The doors opened onto the pristine, polished hallway of the West Wing. He saw the nurse's station at the far end, a small island of light in the dimness. A single nurse sat there, her head bowed over a crossword puzzle. He kept to the opposite wall, his rubber-soled boots making no sound. He reached Helen Monroe's door, room 31B, and his hand hovered over the handle. He paused, momentarily aware of the increased scrutiny a man with dark skin and a tool bag might face in a place like this. This was it. He slipped a thin piece of metal from his sleeve and slid it into the lock. It wasn't a high-security door. A few deft movements, a soft click, and he was inside. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of medical monitors by the bed. He could hear the soft, rhythmic puff of an oxygen machine and the shallow breathing of the woman in the bed. He moved with a liquid silence, his eyes quickly adjusting to the gloom. He saw the bedside lamp, his target. The bug was a tiny marvel of engineering, disguised as the base of a standard electrical plug. All he had to do was switch it with a lamp's existing plug. He knelt by the wall outlet, his fingers working quickly. He unplugged the lamp. The room plunged into near total darkness. He fumbled for a moment, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found the outlet again, guiding the new plug into the sockets. Done. He was about to stand when he heard a sound from the hallway. Footsteps coming closer. He froze, his body tensing, every muscle coiled. He pressed himself flat against the wall beneath the window, shielded by a heavy curtain. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. The handle turned. The door swung open, casting a long rectangle of light into the room. The night nurse stood there, her silhouette framed in the doorway. "Mrs. Monroe," she called out softly. "I thought I heard something." Darius held his breath. He was completely exposed. If she took one step further into the room, he could see her eyes scanning the darkness. She took in the sleeping form in the bed, the silent machines. Her gaze lingered for a heart-stopping second on the now dark lamp. "Must have been dreaming," she murmured to herself. She pulled the door and it closed with a soft final click, plunging the room back into darkness. Darius didn't move for a full minute, letting the adrenaline recede. He rose slowly, his legs shaky, and slipped back out of the room as silently as he had entered. Back in the penthouse, Anna and Gareth were standing over a speaker set up on the table, the air thick with tension. Darius walked in, stripped off the jumpsuit, and tossed it on a chair. "It's done," he said, his voice strained. He nodded at the speaker. "Let's see what we got." Gareth tapped a key on a laptop. At first, there was only static. Then it cleared. The sound filled the silent penthouse, the soft rhythmic puff of the oxygen machine, the faint hum of the monitors, and the shallow medicated breathing of a sleeping woman. They listened for what felt like an eternity. The mundane sounds a strange anticlimax. And then they heard it. A new sound, the distinct metallic click of the door to room 31B opening, then closing. Footsteps heavy and male crossed the room. The silence stretched. Then a voice. Not the nurse, a man. His tone was low, almost a whisper, but it was filled with a chilling, venomous impatience. "Helen!" Donovan Croft's voice hissed through the speaker. "Wake up! We have a problem." The three of them froze. leaning in toward the speaker as if drawn by a gravitational force. The air in the penthouse, once a sanctuary, now felt thin and charged, a conduit for the poison seeping out of the small black box. Through the speaker came the sound of a rustle of bed sheets, then a weak, slurred voice, thick with sleep and medication. "Donovan, what time is it? It doesn't matter what time it is." Donovan's voice was a low, vicious snarl, stripped of all its corporate polish. This was the real man, the one who lived in the shadows. The plan failed, Helen. Everything is falling apart because of some meddling, no-account waiter. Waiter? Helen's voice was a confused whisper. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't," he sneered. "You never do. The Anne Volkov problem was supposed to be solved tonight. A tragic accident just like Alistair, but it was ruined. She's alive and she's asking questions." Anna flinched as if struck. Gareth put a steadying hand on her shoulder. Darius's face was a mask of stone, his eyes burning with intensity as he listened. "But why?" Helen murmured. "Alistair's will, it's done. You have control of the estate funds. Isn't that enough? Enough?" Donovan let out a short, incredulous laugh that was utterly devoid of humor. "You think this was ever about just the money? Alistair was going to ruin me. He found out about the offshore accounts. He was going to expose me, have me arrested. He had a new will drawn up. You pathetic fool." The revelation hit the penthouse with the force of a bomb. "A new will," Helen whispered, a note of fear creeping into her voice. "Yes, one that left every penny of his fortune to a ridiculous environmental charity. One that cut me out, left us with nothing. He had one copy hidden somewhere, only he knew he was going to file it with his lawyers the day after he had his accident." Anya's hands flew to her mouth, a choked gasp escaping. It all made sense. The murder, the urgency, the systematic cruelty. "He told me he would destroy me." Donovan's voice was practically a hiss. "So I destroyed him first. And with you as my grieving, pliable widow, signing everything I put in front of you. I've been bleeding his estate dry for 2 years, but Anna's audit would have found it. She's too smart. Too much like her father. She had to go. Then, with me as CEO and in control of Alistair's fortune through you, no one would ever be able to touch me." "You're a monster," Helen breathed, her voice gaining a sliver of strength from her horror. "Don't take the moral high ground with me, Helen," he spat. "You think these flowers are a sign of affection. They're a reminder. I am the one who keeps you alive." The sound of a small click came through the speaker, followed by the beep of a medical device. "This little machine," Donovan's voice was now unnervingly calm, "gives you the precise dosage you need to counteract the rare blood disorder that suddenly appeared after your husband died. The one that keeps you so conveniently weak and confused? The one that will kill you in a very painful way in less than a week if I decide to stop the treatment, so you will do exactly as I say." The raw, calculated evil of it was breathtaking. Anna felt sick to her stomach. This wasn't just murder and theft. It was torture, a slow, methodical destruction of a human being. "What do you want?" Helen's voice was broken, defeated. "I have to accelerate the timeline," Donovan said. "I can't risk another subtle attempt. It's going to be messy, but it will be definitive. The final merger vote is in 2 days. Before that, there's going to be a tragedy, a fire at the main laboratory. Anna, our brilliant workaholic CEO, will be caught inside working late. A terrible, terrible accident." Gareth's face was grim. "He's going to burn the building down with her in it. And the beauty of it," Donovan continued, his voice dripping with arrogance, "is that the initial investigation will point to corporate sabotage. I've already laid a false trail leading to our biggest competitor. By the time anyone unravels the truth, I'll be so entrenched, so powerful, it won't matter. Now, I need you to sign these papers. A final transfer from the estate trust for expenses." They heard the scratch of a pen on paper, then his footsteps. The door opened and closed, and the room was silent again, but for the soft, steady puff of the machine that was both keeping Helen Monroe alive and holding her hostage. Gareth reached over and shut off the speaker. The silence that followed was louder than the screams in Anya's head. She stood frozen, seeing not a business problem, but a vision of fire, of Helen wasting away in a hospital bed, of Donovan sitting on a throne built of bones. She turned and looked at Darius. The last trace of the client-bodyguard dynamic was gone. Her eyes were filled with a cold, righteous fury. This was her company, her family, her world that he had violated. "We're not going to wait for him to act," she said, her voice a low, steel-edged promise. "We are going to destroy him." Darius met her gaze. The hunter in him was fully awake now. The mission had changed. This wasn't just defense. It was an extermination. "He's right about one thing," Darius said, his voice calm and deadly. "The merger meeting is his deadline. It's the finish line he's racing toward." He looked at Anna, then at Gareth. "So, we're going to use it against him. We're going to turn his finish line into a trap. And we're going to make sure he runs right into it, live in front of his entire world." The 48 hours leading up to the merger vote were a masterclass in controlled deception to the outside world, and more importantly, to Donovan Croft. Anna Volkov was a CEO under immense pressure, reeling from a traumatic event, but determined to push her company's crowning achievement over the finish line. She was at every meeting, her voice sharp, her focus seemingly absolute. She kept Donovan in a tight orbit, consulting him on minor details, deferring to his judgment on optics, making him feel indispensable. She was playing the part of his pawn, all while positioning her pieces for checkmate. Behind the scenes, it was a silent, frantic war. The first move was liberating Helen Monroe. While Donovan was occupied in a budget meeting with Anna, Gareth dispatched a private medical transport team to the Helio Center. Armed with meticulously forged documents citing a sudden critical cardiac event, they transferred a sedated Helen to a secure wing of a private hospital owned by a trusted Vulov BioArm board member. By the time Donovan made his next scheduled visit, his hostage was gone, replaced by a new patient and a nurse who knew nothing. His primary leverage had vanished. Darius became Anna's shadow, officially appointed as a transitional security consultant in the wake of the unfortunate incident. He had unrestricted access to the building and its systems. He and Gareth worked out of a hidden comms room in the tower's sub-basement, a nerve center of screens and encrypted data streams. They watched Donovan's every digital move, mapping his communications, tracking his search history. They saw him trying to contact the assassin, the calls going unanswered. They saw him researching chemical accelerants for fires. He was getting desperate, his arrogance curdling into paranoia. The morning of the merger was overcast, the sky a dull gray slate. Anna stood in the penthouse dressed in a navy blue power suit, the color of iron and resolve. Darius handed her a small, nearly invisible earpiece. "I'll be in the comms room with Gareth," he said. "You'll have a direct line to us. The police are on standby 2 blocks away. The moment you give the signal, they move in." "And the signal?" Anya asked, her heart a steady cold drum. "Say the word legacy," Darius replied. "When you talk about your father's legacy, he'll never see it coming." She looked at him, at the quiet strength in his face. In less than 3 days, this man had gone from a stranger to the anchor of her entire world. "Thank you, Darius," she said, the words carrying a weight that went far beyond gratitude. "For everything." He simply nodded. "Just get through this." The boardroom was filled to capacity. Board members, investors, and the senior partners of the acquiring firm sat around the massive mahogany table. At the head of it sat Anya. To her right, Donovan Croft, looking confident, almost smug. He believed he was hours away from victory. He thought the lab fire was still his ace in the hole, a plan he would execute that very night after the vote was secured. The meeting began. Financials were presented. Projections were discussed. The mood was optimistic, celebratory. Finally, the chairman of the board turned to Anna. "Ms. Vulov, before we cast the final vote, would you care to say a few words?" Anya rose to her feet. A hush fell over the room. She looked around the table, her gaze pausing for a fraction of a second on each face. Finally, her eyes settled on Donovan. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice calm and clear. "Today, we are not just finalizing a merger, we are solidifying a future. A future built on the foundations laid by my father and his partner, Alistair Monroe Donovan, smiled. A slight patronizing incline of his head. They were men of vision, Anna continued, her voice gaining strength. They believed in innovation, in integrity. They believed in building something that would last, something that would help people. They believed in creating a worthy legacy. It was the signal. In the sub-basement, Darius spoke into his microphone. Go. Anya continued, never taking her eyes off Donovan. But a legacy is a fragile thing. It can be nurtured and grown, or it can be poisoned from within. Corrupted by greed and ambition, Donovan's smile faltered. He shifted in his seat, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. For 2 years, Anna said, her voice dropping, becoming as cold and sharp as ice. We believed Alistair Monroe's death was a tragedy. We now know it was a betrayal. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled around the table. Donovan's face went white, and just a few nights ago, Anna pressed on, her voice ringing with power. That same betrayal was meant for me. Behind her, the large presentation screen, which had been displaying the Vulov BioArm logo, flickered. It didn't switch to a financial chart. It switched to a high-resolution photograph of Helen Monroe, frail in her hospital bed. Donovan shot to his feet. What is the meaning of this? Anya, this is inappropriate. Sit down, Donovan, Anya commanded, and the authority in her voice was so absolute that he sank back into his chair. And then the audio began, the recording from the hospital room. Donovan's voice, raw and unfiltered, filled the stunned silence of the boardroom. The Anna Vulov problem was supposed to be solved. A tragic accident, just like Alistair. Gasps filled the room. The board members stared, their faces masks of horror. Donovan looked like he had been turned to stone, the blood draining from his face, his eyes wide with disbelief. The recording continued, each word a nail in his coffin. His confession to Alistair's murder, his methodical poisoning of Helen, his plan to burn Anya alive. As his voice detailed the plot for the lab fire, the main doors of the boardroom swung open. 2 uniformed police officers stepped in, followed by Detective Miller. They walked with quiet, grim purpose directly toward the head of the table. The recording played Donovan's final arrogant words. By the time anyone unravels the truth, I'll be so entrenched, so powerful, it won't matter. Miller reached the table and placed a hand on Donovan Croft's shoulder. I think you'll find that it does, he said quietly. Donovan Croft, you're under arrest for the murder of Alistair Monroe and the conspiracy to murder Anna Vulov. Donovan didn't resist. He was a hollow shell, his empire of lies having crumbled around him in less than 5 minutes. As they led him away in handcuffs, his eyes met Anna's one last time. In them, she saw nothing but the pathetic, empty ruin of a man who had lost everything. Weeks later, the city was settling into a new autumn. The scandal had been immense, but Vulov BioArm, under Anna's unshakable leadership, had weathered the storm. The merger was complete. Donovan Croft's trial was set to be the biggest news of the year. Anna stood on the balcony of the penthouse, which she had since bought. She watched the sunset paint streaks of gold across the skyline. The door slid open behind her, and Darius stepped out, holding 2 glasses of wine. He was now the permanent head of corporate security for the entire merged company. Amara is asleep, he said, handing her a glass. She drew you a picture of a castle. She says you're the queen. Anya smiled, a real unguarded smile. She's not wrong. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the lights of the city begin to twinkle to life. Down in a private recovery center, Helen Monroe was slowly regaining her strength. The poison leaving her system, the truth setting her free. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in 2 years, it was hers. My father and Alistair, Anna said softly. They wanted to build a legacy of healing. Donovan twisted it into something monstrous. She turned to look at Darius, her expression serious. I want to honor them. I want to build something clean again. You will, Darius said, his voice full of a quiet certainty that she found she could rely on more than anything else in the world. Not alone, she replied, her gaze holding his. This company, my life, it needs a protector. Someone who knows what's real. Someone who knows what's worth saving. Darius looked at the city, then back at her. The memory of a spilled coffee pot, of a desperate, selfless act of chaos, felt like a lifetime ago. It had been the end of his old life. But standing here beside this incredible woman, with his daughter sleeping safely inside, he realized it hadn't been an ending at all. It was the beginning of a new legacy. Theirs. 6 months later, the crisp autumn air was filled with the sound of laughter. Not the polite, restrained laughter of a corporate ballroom, but the pure, uninhibited joy of a child. Amara Mitchell, her cheeks glowing from the cold, ran across a field of fallen leaves, chasing a bright red ball. There was no wheeze in her chest, no faint blue tinge to her lips. The portable oxygen tank that had been her constant companion for years was gone, replaced by the simple, miraculous freedom of a deep, easy breath. Darius watched her from a park bench, a thermos of hot chocolate resting beside him. A soft, unfamiliar feeling had taken root in his chest over the past few months. Something he eventually recognized as peace. The constant grinding fear that had been the soundtrack to his life had finally gone silent. He was no longer just Amara's protector, fighting a battle on all fronts. He was just her dad, watching her play. A car door closed softly, and a moment later, Anna sat down beside him on the bench. She wore a simple cashmere sweater and jeans, a world away from the armor of her power suits. She looked at Amara, a genuine warm smile gracing her lips. "Look at her," Anna said, her voice filled with a quiet wonder. "The clinical trial reports are one thing. Seeing her like this is another." "It's your work that did it," Darius said, his gratitude a steady, constant current. "The new gene therapy. You fast-tracked it?" "I prioritized it," she corrected gently. "It was the right thing to do. It's what Vulov BioArm was always supposed to be about." She took the cup of hot chocolate he offered her, their fingers brushing. The small, simple touch felt more significant than any business deal she had ever closed. They sat in a comfortable silence watching Amara. The world had moved on. Donovan Croft had been found guilty on all charges, his arrogant confession in the boardroom sealing his fate. He would spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison. Helen Monroe, now free from his chemical prison, was slowly recovering. She had taken control of Alistair's estate and poured its vast resources into the charitable foundation her husband had intended to create, a final act of love that his killer had tried to prevent. "We launched the Mitchell Grant last week," Anna said, looking out at the park. "The first round of funding is already helping a dozen families get access to treatments they thought they could never afford." She turned to him, her blue eyes clear and direct. "It turns out saving lives is a much better business model than destroying them." Darius smiled. He saw the change in her, the warmth that had thawed the ice of her corporate persona. She was still a brilliant, powerful CEO, but now she was leading with her heart, not just her head. Amara, tired from her playing, came running back to them, her face bright. She launched herself onto the bench between them, leaning her head against Anya's arm. "Are you staying for dinner, Anya?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "I wouldn't miss it," Anna replied, wrapping an arm around the little girl's shoulders. Darius looked at the two of them, his daughter and the woman who had become the center of their new, unexpected life. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a small, creased piece of paper worn soft from being handled so often. It was the crayon drawing Amara had given him for good luck the night he broke into the medical center. A stick figure man and a little girl under a smiling sun. "I kept this with me," he said quietly, showing it to Anna. "It was my armor." Anna smiled, a deep, knowing expression in her eyes. "I have one too." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, showing him the lock screen. It was a photo of a crayon drawing framed and sitting on the corner of her massive office desk. A picture of a castle with a queen in a blue dress standing at the window. Amara looked from the drawing in her father's hand to the photo on Anya's phone. A slow, happy grin spread across her face. She slid off the bench and took Darius's hand with one of hers and Anna's with the other, pulling them to their feet. The three of them stood there for a moment in the fading autumn light. A man who had been a ghost, a woman who had been a target, and a little girl who was the heart of them both. They were not a story of a rescue or a scandal or a merger. They were the story of a family forged in chaos, built on sacrifice, and just beginning their legacy. And as they walked out of the park together, leaving the shadows of the past behind, they looked exactly like the picture. A perfect hand-drawn circle of three, finally home. So that's the end of our story. I really hope a piece of it stays with you. If there was a moment or even just a character that really hit home, I'd honestly be honored to read about it in the comments. It's just amazing to see how one story can land in so many different ways. Look, if you believe stories like this are a kind of light we need in the world, your support means everything. When you like and subscribe, you're doing more than just helping a channel grow. You're really casting a vote for stories that aren't afraid to look at what makes us human. And you're helping that light find someone who might be in the dark. Thank you for lending me your time. It means a lot. Until the next chapter, take care of yourselves and each other.